first time Expedition Bigfoot aired, fans tuned in for adventure, tension, and maybe a few spooky sounds carried by the wind. What no one expected, least of all the field team, was the moment their work stopped feeling like a search and started feeling like a warning. After years of following tracks, chasing heat signatures, and listening to stories told in quiet voices, Russell Accord finally found something that made even him stop talking. He would later describe it simply as the moment they crossed a line. It was not a dramatic phrase, it was an honest one. Because what Russell and his team found was not only unexpected, it made them rethink everything they believed about the wilderness, about what lives in it, and about who pays attention when you start getting close. For years, Russell had gone into the most remote parts of North America with patience and a plan. He wasn't a thrill junkie. He was a former Marine and an experienced tracker who knew how to move quietly, observe without disturbing the environment, and read the ground the way a scientist reads a chart. Footprints, snapped branches, displaced moss, the way the soil held weight, and then slowly let go. All of it forms a story, if you are calm enough to listen. He followed eyewitness reports that never made the news, but stayed alive in small towns. He reviewed thermal clips that were labeled as interesting, but inconclusive. He learned to let go of ego and treat doubt like a tool. And the more he did the work, the more one thing kept coming back. Enough signs to keep going, and never quite enough to end the search. Until this expedition. The team chose a forest region that locals and indigenous communities had long considered unusual. The people who knew the land best had a name for it that translated loosely to the Whispering Zone. It was not a tourist nickname. It was a warning about a place where sound traveled strangely, where echoes arrived before the voice, and where the woods sometimes went quiet all at once. From the first day, the crew felt the difference. There were no birdsong bursts at dawn, no persistent drone of insects, not even the distant rustle of small animals in undergrowth. The silence felt physical, like a pressure on the ears. The trees seemed to hold their breath. It was Russell who spotted the first sign. He raised a hand without speaking and motioned Maria over. She moved quickly, and then froze. In the soft earth was a footprint almost twice the length of a typical adult shoe, sunk deep at the heel, with a clear arch and definite toes. It wasn't a shape made by chance, and there wasn't just one print, there were many. They followed the edge of the tree line, weaving between mossy logs with a stride that was long and steady. The spacing was too consistent to be a joke. The ground told the truth. Something large had moved through with focus, not clumsiness. Russell lowered himself to the ground, set his palm beside the track, and tested the soil's elasticity. The impression was fresh. The weight distribution looked natural. He didn't have to say much. "It's recent," he muttered, almost to himself. "Maybe within the hour." The team had seen many prints over the years, some hoaxed, some misread, some genuine, but weathered. This set felt different immediately. The gait rolled from heel to toe, the way a human walks, only larger, heavier, and smoother. There was nothing theatrical about it. They followed the tracks as they arced toward a stony ridge. Mist gathered where the ground rose. The higher they walked, the more the air seemed to thicken. "We should get the drone up," Maria said. She kept her voice level, not scared, just precise. "We don't go in blind." No one argued. Even Bryce, who often lightened tense moments with a quick line, stayed quiet. They were not dealing with a rumor. They were on a live trail. As they moved deeper, the quiet changed from absence to presence. It felt like the forest had shifted from ignoring them to noticing them. Bryce scanned with a handheld thermal scope and reported nothing solid, only short bursts of heat that flickered in and out as if something stayed just outside the device's comfort. "It's pacing us," Russell said quietly. It wasn't bravado. It was the tone of someone who had tracked wolves and knew what it meant to be observed. In a low clearing, Maria noticed an unusual patch of flattened brush, not random or wind-thrown. It formed a rough oval, compressed evenly, with a few embedded fibers that gleamed under the flashlight. Long, reddish-brown strands, thick near the base and tapering to soft ends. She collected them with clean tweezers and labeled the vial. "This wasn't made by weather," she said. "This was made by a body." They chose to set camp close enough to keep the area under watch, far enough to avoid obvious exposure. As dusk fell, a faint vibration rolled under their boots. It wasn't an earthquake jolt. It was a slow, steady movement like a heavy step resonating through the ground. A small puddle quivered. "That's not tectonic," Maria said, eyes on the water's ripples. "That's weight." Russell scanned the edge of the trees one last time before turning away. As he killed his light, two faint reflections flashed back at him from the brush. Eyes shine at a height a man could not reach without climbing. He raised the beam again, steady and controlled. The eyes were gone. "Stay sharp," he said. There was no drama in it, just a plan. Dawn arrived pale and unfriendly. The silence remained. Russell retraced the previous day's path to the creek bed, where the soil had firmed in the cold night. He was not expecting much. Then he saw them. New prints. Deeper than before, with toe detail almost too clear to be real. He knelt, mouth tightening. "It came back," he said softly, "while we slept. Here's a clear, easy English rewrite that keeps all the key details and mood, but uses simple words and shorter sentences." The team gathered around the tracks. Each step was almost 6 feet apart. Along the toes, they could see fine skin lines, like fingerprints. Maria took a slow breath. "You can't fake this," she said. "Not with this much detail." Bryce mixed plaster to make casts of the prints. He moved carefully, like someone who knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime find. He checked how firm the ground was and did a quick estimate of weight. "At least 700 pounds, he said. No one argued. Then they noticed something else. There was a second trail of prints next to the first one. These prints were smaller, but matched the big ones step for step, just with a shorter reach and lighter pressure. "Two individuals," Maria said. She didn't need to explain more. "One unknown creature is a story. Two moving together suggests a group, maybe even a family." When the casts were ready, Russell compared the foot arches with molds of known primates. They didn't match gorillas or orangutans. The arch looked closer to human, but scaled up and shaped for the terrain. "This isn't a random mistake of evolution," he whispered. "This looks made for these hills." He didn't mean built by people. He meant shaped by time and the land. Suddenly, 3 sharp knocks came from the trees. They were clear, even, and evenly spaced. It sounded like wood hitting wood, not a branch falling. Russell lifted his radio, not to talk, but to record the sound. "We're not alone," he said. He wasn't scared. He was stating a fact. By mid-afternoon, the tracks led them to a mossy slope. The ground got harder, and the prints faded, but the path stayed steady. Maria stopped and pointed. Between 2 big rocks was a dark opening, like a missing tooth in the ridge. The air at the entrance felt colder than the hillside. Their breath showed in thin white streams. "That's not normal airflow," Maria said softly. "It feels like it's breathing in there." Russell examined the rock edges. Natural caves usually look jagged and broken. This entrance looked smooth, as if something large had gone in and out many times, polishing the stone. "It's used," he murmured. "Used a lot." They turned on the drone. The video showed a tunnel going much deeper than they expected. Long scrape marks ran along the walls. The drone's light kept catching them, then losing them. "Something dragged heavy things through here," Maria said. The drone signal started to glitch. The image froze with static, and then died. The pilot tried to reconnect. Nothing. "That shouldn't happen at this range," he said. He was right. No one rushed into the cave. They set motion sensors and thermal cameras around the slope. They placed another infrared drone on standby. They agreed. No one would go inside yet. Not without more eyes. Night fell heavy. The fire burned small, as if the air wouldn't feed it. At 2:14 a.m., a motion alarm pinged with a clear metal tone. On the monitor, at the edge of the frame, a large upright shape stood still. "Zoom," Bryce said, steady but tense. The figure didn't move. Then it slowly turned its head. Two eyes reflected light straight back into the camera. The feed flashed white, then went black. A deep sound followed, low and heavy, not loud but felt, like a distant drum shaking in their chests. "It's close," Maria said, stepping back with her night scope. She could only see fog and shapes. The sound came again, from behind the tents, a heavy step. Then another. Thud, thud, thud! The fire lifted, flames dancing higher, as if a wave of pressure moved over them. "No one moves," Russell whispered. They held still for 10 long seconds. In the dark beyond the firelight, a pair of eyes blinked again, at about a tall man's height, but set wider apart. Then they were gone. Whatever it was, it knew exactly where the light ended. It wanted them to know it could show itself, or hide, whenever it chose. Morning came gray and flat. Russell went through the thermal footage frame by frame. On the screen was a heat outline like nothing they knew, upright, balanced, moving smoothly, with shoulders rolling in a strong, controlled way. "Two-legged," Maria said quietly. "Not a bear. Not at that speed." Bryce started saving the video as a backup. The laptop glitched. The file scrambled and crashed. "Corrupted," he said, and let out a breath. It had happened before, right when proof was close. Maria called them over to a tree on the edge of camp. Coarse hairs were stuck in the rough bark, reddish-brown, thick at the base, about as wide as human hair, and tapering at the ends. She collected them carefully with sterile tools. They used a portable analyzer to run a basic DNA category test. It wouldn't name a species, but it could say what kind of animal. The machine hummed while they waited in quiet, controlled hope. The screen flashed. Unknown primate. Human match? 97%. No one cheered. It wasn't that kind of moment. Maria finally exhaled. "It's close enough to confuse the software," she said, "but different enough to count as unknown." Bryce started to speak, but the radio cut in with static, and then a voice. It wasn't any of theirs. Calm. Even. Unfamiliar. "Stop collecting samples." The voice wasn't loud or angry. It didn't need to be. "Identify," Russell said into the air, keeping his words few. The same reply came back, "Stop collecting samples." A minute later, the analyzer shut down by itself. The generator still showed a full charge. The system said everything was fine. It wasn't. Russell felt the weight of being the person everyone looked to for a decision. "We are not alone out here," he said. He meant two things, something in the woods and someone else listening. They tried to keep busy. They set extra alarms and more audio backups. But later that night, something strange happened. Russell was watching the monitors when a wave of dizziness hit him. It wasn't panic. It felt like losing air at high altitude. Soft at first, then total. He blinked, and suddenly the fire was out. The generator lights were off, and the sky had jumped from midnight to morning. He checked his watch, 3:04 a.m. It blinked and changed to 5:17. Every device, cameras, phones, GPS, showed the same missing block of time. Maria came out of her tent with dirt and sap on her hands. She didn't remember leaving her sleeping bag. The last thermal clip ended at 1:16 a.m. After that, nothing. Russell walked the camp's edge and read the ground. New prints circled the tents twice, evenly spaced and calm. The depth showed something heavy stood still in places, watching. Bryce checked the audio. For 30 minutes, wind and static. Then came knocks, slow and even, in sets of 3. After each set was a low rumble that made the microphones distort. Under that, almost too quiet to hear, was a soft, human-like murmur in no language they knew. Communication, Maria said. This is a pattern, not random noise. That word, communication, changed the mood. It moved the idea from an animal to a culture, from accident to choice. They drove back to their main base in focused silence. Russell held the sample case on his lap. "We're not losing this," he said. "Not again." At the small lab they had used for years, their badges didn't work. The building looked closed, though it should have been open. A paper sign on the door said, "Operations suspended pending investigation." No names, no dates, just a new lock. Bryce called the network, no answer. His emails bounced. Maria opened their shared drive. The folders were gone. Drone videos, thermal logs, field notes, metadata, replaced by a single file named "Do Not Pursue." Inside, one line read, "For your safety, discontinue all analysis of northern samples. No author, no reason." "They know what we found," Russell said. He wasn't angry, just clear. "And they don't want it out." That night, in the motel, Russell's phone rang at 2:09 a.m. The screen showed no number. He answered. 3 seconds of silence. Then a calm male voice. "You've done enough." The line went dead. The next morning, an official network message arrived. The show was paused pending creative restructuring. There was no note about safety, no request for a briefing. A final clause told them not to share anything from the last trip. Within 24 hours, travel permits, access records, and even calendar entries tied to the expedition disappeared. It didn't feel like a pause. It felt like the whole project had been erased. Maria looked at the empty drive index and summed it up. "They didn't just shut us down," she said. "They removed the trail." They went home with what was left. 2 plaster casts, a locked case with hair strands, 1 corrupted thermal frame showing a tall heat outline, and a night no one could explain. Russell tried to do what he always did: organize, check, document, keep going, but the silence around them didn't feel like a gap. It felt like a wall. He began to think about the warning that came through the radio, calm and controlled. Stop collecting samples. He replayed the phrase in his head, considered who would have both the interest and the equipment to push a voice into their channel in that terrain. He thought about a second possibility. Something intelligent in the forest, mimicking human speech. He did not like either answer. He finally slept and dreamed he was standing at the cave mouth, watching his breath drift in and out the way the hillside seemed to breathe with him. When he woke, the search felt different. It was no longer a simple question of whether something unknown existed. It had become a question about control. Who decides what the public is allowed to know? And why? He looked at the plaster casts lined up like white footprints across his kitchen table and felt the same quiet certainty he'd felt on the ridge. This was no longer a hunt. This was a line. He kept his phone off after the motel call and ignored email for days. When he finally opened his laptop, a small station he respected had sent an invitation to talk. Not a splashy segment or a stunt, just a careful conversation. He didn't answer at first. He wasn't afraid. He was aware. Once you speak a truth out loud, you cannot take it back, and you can't pretend the weight of it is yours alone. Before deciding, he made one last visit to the forest with a trusted friend. No full team, no base camp, no drones, no alarms. They walked the ridge in gray light, stopped well short of the cave, and listened. The heavy silence was still there, shaped and watchful. They stayed an hour, left nothing behind, and withdrew as gently as they'd come. Back in town, he sat in a diner with cold coffee and a blank notebook. He wrote 3 lines. We crossed a line. It was not a mistake. It paid attention. He closed the cover, paid the check, and stepped into a day that felt too ordinary for what he now carried. He eventually accepted the station's invitation for a single interview. He did it to create a clean record in his own words, before someone else wrote the ending. He did it because the people who had trusted him with their stories for years deserved the same care in return. When the microphone went live, he didn't start with fear. He began with respect. He said the team went in honoring the land and its stories and left with even more. He described the prints in steady detail. He explained the DNA reading without hype, an unknown primate result with a 97% human match, close enough to confuse software, distinct enough to be itself. He spoke about the calm voice on the radio and the blank hours with the tone of a field report, not a performance. Asked whether the show ended because of budgets or ratings, he shook his head. People think we stopped because of funding, he said. We stopped because we found something, and it scared the wrong people. He didn't name those people. He didn't need to. He explained the difference between discouragement and a warning. The voice over the radio wasn't a prank. The lab shutdown wasn't a coincidence. Their work had been careful, and that's why they listened when the forest seemed to say, enough. What would the public never see? He chose his words. There's footage of eye shine from something tall, he said. It blinks, it steps, and right then, the drone dies. Then, we were told for years we were chasing myths, but when the myth looked back, we were told to look away. He didn't cry. He didn't raise his voice. He told the story straight. When the interview ended, he thanked the host for the space to be plain. He went home, sat with the casts, and laid his hand beside the long tow line. The shape felt like intention, something that moved with intelligence through a silence that belonged more to the land than to anyone walking it. That night, as the house settled and the familiar sounds of the neighborhood returned, he understood what had shifted inside him. Before this expedition, the unknown felt like a puzzle. After it, the unknown felt like a neighbor. You don't break into a neighbor's home. You don't dig up their yard. You stand at the fence, listen, and accept that not every question needs an answer, especially if the cost of that answer is harm. He waited to see if anyone else would speak. No one did. So he did what he could do well. He kept a careful record in language he trusted, measured, human, and quiet. At the edge of the whispering zone and at the mouth of the breathing cave, he had learned the difference between chasing a story and becoming part of one. He chose his side. The morning after the network's message, the world seemed out of tune. Dogs trotted down sidewalks. A lawnmower sputtered to life. Delivery trucks idled at a light. Ordinary life can feel loud after a place where even trees go quiet. He set the sample case on the table and stared. The casts, the hair, the corrupted thermal clip, and the empty hours weren't souvenirs. They were proof of a boundary crossed. He called Maria first. She had backed up her notes by hand, dates, weather, measurements, because paper doesn't crash. She had also copied the knocks, the low rumbles, and the faint murmur onto a recorder with no wireless function. Then Bryce called, tired but steady. He'd tried every tool to repair the corrupted file. No luck. But he had frozen one frame. A tall, upright outline with a swimmer's shoulders and a smooth, deliberate gait. Not a bear. Not a trick. Maybe not enough to convince a skeptic. Enough to keep an honest person awake. They set rules for the next week. Keep the circle small. Keep materials offline. Take one measured step at a time. That afternoon, he drove a quiet route to meet a biologist he trusted. Not for a full workup, just a sanity check. The man studied the hair through a scope. Human-like in some ways, not quite human in others. Not any North American mammal he knew. He handed back the vial and declined to be named. At 2:09 a.m., the phone rang again. Same blank screen. Same calm voice. "You've done enough." He didn't argue. He powered down the phone and stared into his yard. What he felt wasn't fear. It was a boundary. The same boundary he'd sensed at the cave, when the hillside seemed to breathe. Respect means stopping. Small doors closed in the days that followed. An event rescheduled. A shipment paused. Warm emails turning neutral. It wasn't scandal. It was cooling. Maria's words rang true. Paper trails aren't only files and invoices. They're relationships that quietly stop returning calls. He agreed to the studio interview for one reason: to leave an accurate record. He brought a small notebook, one sheet of bullet points, and no appetite for drama. He described process before result, gridding a site, laying sensors, marking wind, measuring stride, documenting before speaking. Then he detailed the last expedition. The prints, the bedding, the hair in the brush, the drone failure at a distance that should have been safe, the eye shine, the heavy steps, the way the fire rose on a pressure wave, the morning's thermal outline, the analyzer's reading, the voice on the radio. He let the facts do the talking. When asked about the missing time, he offered only what he knew. There was a window between 1:16 a.m. and dawn where every device recorded nothing. No struggle, no rush, just a different sky, a dead generator, and prints circling their camp in two patient loops. Absence, he said, is also data. After the interview, the network sent a polished note about creative direction. He didn't respond. Instead, he did the work he could own. He wrote a private field report and dated it. He printed maps, weather logs, and alarm times. He labeled vials, stored casts, and made 3 copies of the audio. He didn't publish or tease. He held it all the way you hold something that might someday be handed to someone who won't turn it into a brand. People expect explosions. Real stories end with choices. He chose to protect the land by keeping the coordinates quiet. He chose to protect his team by avoiding a fight he couldn't win without hurting them. He chose to keep what he legally could and let go of what he couldn't recover without damage. He spoke clearly once, then stepped back. Months later, when the snow lifted and the ground softened, he returned alone. He kept his distance from the cave, sat on a fallen log, and watched the light. Birds, insects, small lives, everything ordinary again. The silence was the right kind, full of life rather than attention. He stood to leave, and felt simple gratitude that the place remained larger than his work. At home, he wrote for himself. How to tell the difference between quiet and quiet. Where curiosity ends and intrusion begins. Why unknown shouldn't be a dare, but a reminder that some truths are not ours to take. Maria taught careful methods to younger teams. Bryce advised crews who wanted data, not noise. When asked about the missing hours, they said what they'd agreed to say. We recorded what we recorded, and we won't build a bigger story than the facts. Sometimes he sets the casts on the table and places his hand beside them. He feels again the grounded certainty from that morning near the creek. Something moved through here with care. Like us, but not us. Shaped by time to cross a terrain we only visit. People ask what it is. He answers plainly. An intelligent, upright, heavy-bodied primate or near-primate that communicates in patterned knocks and low tones, sometimes in groups, able to choose when to be seen and when to live just beyond our tools. One more thing. It responds to respect. If you pressed him for advice, he would keep it simple. Go in humble. Read sign. Don't assume meaning. If you find a track, document it and step back. If you hear 3 knocks, listen before you answer. If the night feels like a held breath, lower your voice. If you sense you're being watched, take it as a courtesy, not a challenge. Leave the place whole. He doesn't ask anyone to believe him. Belief isn't the point. Care is. The expedition didn't give him a trophy. It gave him a measure. Success, he says, is sometimes an unseen neighbor left undisturbed, a cast on a shelf, and a choice you can live with. And if you ever feel that boundary in the woods, a line you can sense but not see, turn back. Let the ridge breathe. Let the myth stay a neighbor. Carry your respect home. In the end, that is the only evidence that matters.